let's try this out. The first step, always, 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 is to label A, B, and C, okay? So I'm gonna look here, I see my two sides that make the right angle are here and here. I'm gonna call this A, this B, and this C. Okay, now I'm gonna use my formula. My formula is A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And I'm gonna plug the numbers into my formula, and then I'm gonna solve. And you actually have all the skills to do this already. So A is 6, so this is 6 squared, plus B is 3, that's 3 squared, equals C squared. Okay, now I'm trying to solve for C. I'm trying to get C by itself. So first I notice there's some simplifying to do over here. So 6 squared, that's 6 times 6. 3 times 3, okay, make sure, right, it's not 6 plus 6, not 12. It's 6 times 6, this is 3 times 3. Okay, 36 plus 9 is 45. And again, sometimes the numbers will be more difficult. You'll need a calculator. Now, what do we do when we get here? Well, if something is squared, we do the inverse, right? We square root it. So I'm going to square root. If I square root this side, I square root this side. I'm going to do the square root of 45. Okay, now, I get a decimal. In algebra, we don't like to deal with these decimals, but in geometry, we're talking about length. So we're trying to find the length of this. So we don't want to say, oh, it's square root of 45, right? That's silly. We're going to say the length is 6.7. Now, remember we talked about in algebra that it's positive or negative, but in geometry, this is a length. So lengths can't be negative. So we just ignore that negative solution. So this is 6.7. Notice what I'm doing. I'm rounding to the nearest tenth. So I'm cutting it off after one decimal place. In this case, this number is a 0, so it just stays 6.7. Let's say that number was like an 8, it would round up to 6.8. So this is C equals 6.7. That's my answer. I'm just going to look and see, like, does that make sense? Remember, the hypotenuse is the longest side, so does that make this the longest side? Yeah, right? This one's 6, this one's going to be a little bit longer. Okay, let's try one more example. Once again, I'm going to label, right? This is A and B. My hypotenuse is this side, C. Okay, so I'm plugging in. Notice I have decimals here, so what? I'm just going to use a calculator. 2.7 squared plus 6.5 squared equals C squared. Okay, so here, obviously, this is 2.7 times 2.7. You can enter 2.7 times 2.7, or you can just use this button right here to square it. Okay, that's 7.29. And then 6.5 squared, 42.25. Okay, once again, I'm adding them. 7.29 plus 42.25. And then, right, if I want C by itself, how do I do that? Well, C is being squared, so I square root it. I do the inverse. Watch, kind of a cool trick here. So second, square root. Now, I could just type that decimal. I can just type 49.54. But look, see this where it says answer? That gives you the previous answer. So if I do this, then that gives me like the answer I just had on my calculator. And it's 7.03. 7.03. I'm rounding to the nearest tenth. Okay. So in this case, it's going to be 7.0. Again, let's say this number was like a 6, then it would be 7.1. Okay, but since it's 4 or below, it just rounds down. So I get 7.0. Okay, so what you're going to do now is you're going to do this practice problem, check it on the next slide, and then you have some space to work in IXL. You probably will need more space than this, though, so you can grab a whiteboard.